But we start tonight with the problem of soccer violence, a problem which looks set to wreck this country's most popular spectator sport unless a solution is found very soon. These days, weekend violence on the terraces is no longer headline news. It's become a familiar scene, just another Saturday. This week, the Football Association are expected to announce what penalties they're going to impose on Derby County and Leeds United for the incidents in which visiting Leeds United supporters ripped 800 seats from the stands. This week also, the FA are due to rule on an almost identical incident at Derby 7 days later, this time involving Chelsea fans. Well, this weekend, Chelsea played Derby again, this time at Chelsea's ground. There were fears of yet more violence. A nationwide team with reporter Tony Wilkinson were at the Derby and Chelsea grounds as they prepared for just another Saturday.
Red hair. There's someone down on the north entrance, north aisle. 4 or 5 in. They can be taken out from that location. And deal. I'll give directions.
Saturday afternoon at Chelsea Football Ground in London. This policeman is keeping an eye on some of the most notorious football fans in the country, the Chelsea boys, the terrors of Stamford Bridge. Today, because they're at home, they look comparatively harmless. It's when they travel to away games that violence follows in their wake. Only 10 days ago, these were the same Chelsea fans in action. The place, the baseball ground at Derby. The Chelsea boys ripped 400 seats from the stands, hurling them towards the pitch. 6 people were taken to hospital, 25 fans were arrested. The home club, Derby County, claimed that most of the seats had been ripped out systematically throughout the game, and that the Chelsea supporters were only waiting for the excuse to riot. After all, it was only a week since Leeds United supporters had ripped up another stand at Derby, causing £20,000 worth of damage. The Chelsea fans, Derby argued, couldn't bear to be outdone. As for the Chelsea boys themselves, they had their own explanations.
What happened in Derby? Well, there was a lot of things happened. Yeah. I mean, all right, yeah, there was fights and everything, right? But nothing was said on the telly about, or in the press about, Derby throwing coins at our players. I mean, Jay Jones is running about with blood all over him. Nothing was said about that. It was just about how Chelsea had wrecked the seats.
Did you see seats being pulled
Yeah, I
up?
mean, I nearly got hit by them. I was in the seats themselves and I wasn't being nearly hit by them.
What was going on?
It was just a small minority that started ripping the seats out.
But it takes quite a lot of force to rip a seat out.
It doesn't.
They're cracked, yeah.
They are pathetic seats.
Plastic seats.
They're rubbish.
Yeah. Look, you have a look down that road now. Once upon a time, it'd be full. Because everybody's just scared to come here now. No one comes, do they? Come on.
That's right.
Got to be truthful about it.
What's the reason they're scared?
Oh, come on.
Trouble.
Well, it's trouble, isn't it? Chelsea last week, Chelsea every bloody week, isn't it?
Last Friday, a Football Association commission found Derby guilty for failing to take enough precautions against the Leeds fans who rioted 2 weeks ago. Derby's chairman, Mike Watterson, was told that he should have segregated the visitors from the home supporters. This week, the FA will consider how much blame Mr. Watterson's club must take for failing to stop the Chelsea boys emulating the violence of Leeds. It may seem harsh to blame home sides at all for the mayhem caused by visiting fans, but it's arguable, as our report will show, that clubs can adopt defensive strategies which prevent violence. Perhaps Derby had some lessons to learn from the very club which caused all the trouble at its last home game, Chelsea. Ken Bates is the chairman of Chelsea. It was he who tried in vain to calm his rioting fans at Derby, but he thinks the home club had already made too many mistakes.
We had an awful lot of supporters. I don't think they expected anything like the number of people that turned up. We had 5,000 or 6,000 Chelsea supporters there, and it's quite clear they weren't expecting anything like that number. We've had a lot of complaints from supporters who were there from 2 o'clock and didn't get into the game until 3:30.
After it had started?
After it had started. Well, that in itself creates bad temper and ill feeling.
Oh, that is complete nonsense. A train arrived late. They arrived at the ground late. Quite a lot got in for nothing and were let in for nothing because they'd arrived late. People like that will just use any excuse as a reason for coming and causing damage.
Another thing is that the stewarding appeared to be a bit lax and people were able to move from one place to another without being properly supervised and controlled, which is something which wouldn't happen here.
I think you've got to remember one thing, that we have stewards at this club, the same as every other club, or the majority of other clubs. How can you expect a man who does a job for a football club because he loves the football club, for the few pounds that he's paid on a Saturday afternoon, to become involved in the kind of violent scenes that we've seen quite recently? You can't expect that. It's not possible. There is no one can tell me that an army of 5,000 people from London came with the explicit reason of watching a game of football. They were standing up for the last 15 minutes of the game with the seats in their hands. They just came to wreck the place. And everyone just stood there and watched it happen.
If there are any coaches, then some of you will be escorting the Derby supporters back to the coach park.
Just after midday at Chelsea's ground on Saturday, and by a cruel coincidence, the club is to play Derby again, only a week after the last violence. There are fears that the Derby fans will seek revenge. On Derby Station, only a handful of soccer fans board the train to London, and many of those support other sides. The Derby chairman asked his fans not to travel to Chelsea. In fact, he'd welcome a ban on away support altogether. These two Derby supporters don't agree.
What do you think about the idea of banning fans from going to away matches altogether?
I don't know, it would certainly stop the troubles, but it would reduce my sort of football time watching Derby to about 50%, so I wouldn't agree with it.
I think it's being a bit daft really, because there's going to be people go anyway. I mean, the real loyal supporters go everywhere, home, away, no matter where it is, they'll still go. But the hooligans might not go. The hooligans probably stay at home, because the coaches stopped.
Were you at the Chelsea game, the last one?
Yeah.
How far do you think Derby County was to blame for the trouble like that?
They weren't at all. It was just the Chelsea fans. I mean, they started throwing seats onto their own supporters. There was no Derby fans there at all. Just a few Chelsea fans up in the Leeds stand, but I don't think there's any trouble there.
Would you think the Chelsea fans are a sort of different breed from the Derby fans?
Yeah, I think they're animals. Most of them. I mean, they don't come for the game at all. It's just to get fights afterwards.
Back at Chelsea, the club is testing its latest anti-hooligan device, video cameras linked to a recorder, a system which costs £25,000.
Well, we have two cameras, one of which is mounted over in the shed and one of which is on the west stand. When those two cameras between them can monitor every part of the ground. They have a zoom lens and they're strong enough to pick out the pimples on somebody's nose on the other side of the ground.
But that's not going to stop trouble if it starts, is it?
It isn't going to stop trouble, but it enables you to record the trouble so you can go for the offenders, whereas at the moment it's very difficult to pick out offenders in a crowd.
2:30 and the Chelsea fans arrive at the ground. For the police, it's a tense time. Their job is to identify visiting supporters and shepherd them into a separate terrace at the north end of the ground.
Well, I think successful policing of any football match is based on segregation. And if you can keep rival supporters apart before, during and after a match, you will not usually have any trouble. And that's the whole premise on which a police operation at a match like this is based.
Next season, Chelsea plans to go even further by segregating fans into 7 separate areas. One for pensioners, another for young children, another for season ticket holders and so on. But always trying to keep the troublemakers as far apart as possible. When the match starts, only 50 Derby supporters can be seen on the North Terrace. They have plenty to cheer about. Their side won 3-1, the team's first away win this season. But the club chairman would rather they hadn't come. He'd like every game to be played before an audience of home supporters only.
What I would personally like to do next year to overcome it is to have a complete identity card system that allows your own fans only into a game. I know fans in Derby would love. But that again presents its own problems. Because if you are a police force and you are suddenly presented with 500 people who come up to the ground and say, we are from wherever, the team that you're playing, and we are going to go into your ground, or we're going to do damage. What do the police do?
So it's
Where is the situation?
Your idea, isn't it?
I'm not saying it's impractical. It all depends on whether we want to let mob rule run this country.
The Chelsea approach is not to exclude fans, but to control them. Already, the video system has helped identify 6 troublemakers, and the police have ejected them. But in future, the video cameras could be used in a more radical way. What's revolutionary about this new technology isn't the video itself, because that's been around for a long time, but the use that Chelsea are going to make of it. Because what they plan is civil as well as criminal proceedings against soccer thugs. That would involve court injunctions against thugs to stop them coming into the ground. Now, if they were seen on the video the following week, that would mean they'd be in breach of that injunction, and they could be fined or even imprisoned. 20-5. The game is over, and the disappointed Chelsea fans leave for home. The Derby supporters are kept back by the police for 15 minutes in the hope that the streets will have cleared to allow them safe passage. But half an hour after the game has ended, out of sight of our cameras, 20 Chelsea supporters are waiting in ambush. As I made my way home, I found myself in the centre of a bottle-throwing fight between rival fans. The club had done its best to keep them apart, but as usual, the Hooligans had the last word. Chelsea's chairman knows he can only do so much.
And I think this is an evil that we've got to fight. We've got to fight it in the schools, in the home, where a lot of the trouble comes from, on the streets, in the football grounds, and in the magistrates' courts.